Will we finally have the giant Onslaught from Marvel vs. Capcom, with that tiny head in the animation? So guys, how are you? I hope you're doing well. I'm the Monio, the interdimensional demon who talks the most about X-Men 97 on YouTube, and you're on my channel. And at the end of X-Men 97 we had an epic clash between Professor X and Magneto, which resulted in the epic scene taken from the comic in which Wolverine's adamantium is brutally removed, and in the comics this marks the beginning of a phase most bestial of Wolverine in which there are some attempts to put the adamantium back into his body but they all fail. Only a long time later, when Wolverine becomes one of Apocalypse's horsemen, he finally gets the adamantium back. And at this time we have one of the most remarkable story arcs, with one of the most difficult villains that the X-Men have ever faced. I'm talking about Onslaught, who is a fusion between Magneto and the dark side of Professor X, which has devastating power, and yes, many people remember it as the final boss of the 1998 game Marvel vs. Capcom. But the Monio, how exactly does Professor X become Onslaught? Well, after Magneto takes away Wolverine's adamantium, Professor X uses his telepathic powers to turn off Magneto's mind, leaving him catatonic, but during the psionic contact between their minds, Magneto's anger, pain and desire for revenge entered Xavier's consciousness, mixing with all the negative feelings he had but had been repressed for decades, and this resulted in a separate personality forming within Professor X, the being who became known as Onslaught. At first Onslaught lay dormant within Professor X's consciousness. Over time, his frustrations began to increase, and this intensified as the hatred against mutants increased, and the many recent deaths of mutants that were caused by the legacy virus, and after an extreme event near his institute, involving the death of a child by anti-mutant humans, Professor X reached breaking point, and it was at that moment that Onslaught awakened within Xavier. Note that this entire context is very similar to everything that happened in X-Men 97, all of Xavier's frustration due to his absence, what happened to Wolverine, and even the deaths of mutants due to the legacy virus, which in series, was caused by the attack on Genosha. We have many parallels with everything that happened, and even visual rhymes, like in the scene where Professor X is forced to wear Magneto's helmet, which could be a reference to what will happen to him in the second season. But the Monio, how exactly does Onslaught stop being Professor X and become that monster with that armor that looks like Magneto's outfit? Well, after manifesting in Professor X's mind, Onslaught eventually starts to manifest himself in the form of psionic energy, inside a suit of armor, and he uses part of the power of Franklin Richards and Nate Gray, two extremely powerful mutants, which makes Onslaught become such a threat that he needed to have the Avengers' interference to be defeated. Of course, in the animation, we still don't have Franklin Richards or Nate Gray, so probably the manifestation of Onslaught's power will come in other ways, perhaps using Bastion's power and technology to create his armor, since Bastion can easily transform normal people into superpowered human sentinels. I also wouldn't bet that in the animation Professor X will turn off Magneto's mind, since the character was very well worked on during this season, and it wouldn't be very viable to discard him in that way, but in the state of hatred for humanity that Magneto is in at the moment, it would be very difficult to bring him aside of the X-Men again, so I'm really curious about the direction the series will take in the second season. But it is a fact that X-Men animation, since 1992, has always aimed to adapt the comics in a relatively faithful way, so I believe that adapting the Onslaught saga is a logical and natural path that X-Men 97 should follow, especially after the events of the final episodes. But what about you? Do you agree with me? Leave it in the comments, and if you liked the video, subscribe to follow the next content. Until next time my people, demonic hugs.